Welcome to Real Money, Real Life, the podcast where we get real about money and the messy human stuff that comes with it. I'm Linda Grizely, financial wellness speaker, personal finance educator, and creator of the Me Money Method. This is the show for people who feel behind financially and want to finally understand money and make confident decisions that work in their real life. Because money isn't just math, it's life. And you deserve to feel confident with money and good about how you spend it. Hello, everyone. Making more money can help, but it does not automatically tell your money where to go. A lot of people believe that once they reach a certain income level, their money stress should disappear. But real life does not work that way. Someone can be making six figures and still feel behind. They can have a strong income, a growing business, or a career that looks successful from the outside, but still feel like they do not have enough saved, do not know where the money is going, or are not building the kind of financial stability they thought that income would create. Today, I'm talking with Jackson Larimer about that gap between income and actual financial progress, especially for younger high earners and small business owners who are trying to build a life, a business, and a financial foundation at the same time. Jackson had a quarter-life crisis when his oldest son was born. That moment led him to quit his comfortable corporate job cold turkey for a half-baked business idea of becoming a financial coach, and even though he had exactly zero paying clients at the time. That was back in 2023, and thankfully things worked out, and now Jackson specializes in helping small business owners with their personal financial strategy. Jackson is also the host of Money with Jackson, where he helps people think more clearly about money, income, and building a financial life that works. Welcome, Jackson.
Thank you so much for having me today, Linda. I'm excited for the conversation, and that was a great intro.
Yeah, I know that we talked before. We have sort of similar stories. I also left a corporate job cold turkey with no idea what I was going to be doing next, and found my way into the speaking and coaching and podcasting business. And so it's great to be here sharing our stories with each other. So tell us about your quarter life crisis. Tell us what was happening in your life and how this whole thing of financial coaching started.
So back when I was in college, I remember my freshman year, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do for my career. And like most 20-year-old guys, I was thinking about the money. Like, where can I go make the most money, coming out of college? And so I ended up taking a job in sales. It wasn't really the right fit for me. I was good at it. I was successful. I was working in tech sales at the time, and it just wasn't filling my cup, so to speak. It was draining energy from me. So even though things were maybe going well on paper, they were not going well inside. My wife tells me that she felt like I was having a mental breakdown every Sunday night, and I'm having to go back on Monday. And I knew that something needed to change. Most of the traditional advice out there is if you're going to start a business, build it up to 60% of your income from your day job before you quit. That's really good advice. It didn't work for me because I was so stressed that I felt like I just needed to cut that off. And it just had to be a clean break for me where if I was going to do something different, I wanted to go all in from day one. And I also really wanted to get that stress off of my shoulders. So that's what I did.
Well, congrats to you. It sounds like everything's going well and you made the right decision. Looking back, when you think about this, was that decision, it obviously wasn't about money because you would have stayed where you were. But was it more about meaning, freedom, identity, or what do you think it was really about?
Yeah, I'll add in a few more details to the story there. This time when I was considering quitting my corporate job, which I ended up doing, was the same time that my son was born and I became a dad. And I had 2 months of paternity leave where I had this time off and I was just mulling things over in my brain. And I was already working remotely, so I did have some pretty good flexibility, but I realized that I wanted to design my own life And I didn't necessarily want my career to dictate my life, so to speak. It was an act of intentionality for me of figuring out what is it that's going to light me up and energize me for the next 30 years of my life rather than draining my energy. So it was a deep process of self-reflection. And then when I had this little break with paternity leave where I was still getting paid, but I had more free time, I was like, okay, now's my chance. Let me go for this and see how it's going to go. And if I think it has legs, then I can make decisions accordingly. So I went for it. I was working fully, full time through my paternity leave on this business idea of becoming a financial coach. And kind of 4 or 5 weeks into that process, I had a conversation with my boss. I told him, I said, hey, there's a chance I might not come back. And he said, that's fine. Just finish out these couple projects for us and we'll be okay. So we're able to part on really good terms. I was grateful that he was really understanding with that. And it gave me a chance to just jump in with both feet and say, I'm going to go for it. I'm in my 20s. I'm young. Yes, I've got family responsibilities with my wife and son, but if I fail, I have time to recover. And I try and be careful when I'm sharing this story with people because now, as a financial coach, I have a lot of people come to me that say, I want to start a business. And I take a look at their financial situation and they're living right up at the limit of their income. They don't have emergency savings or they have debt or whatever it might be. And I try and reinforce to them, this was not a blind jump for me. My wife and I, we were very intentional about it. We kept our expenses low. We had a really beefy savings account that I had to draw on pretty consistently for a long time while I was building up my client base. So although it was a scary jump and it was a big jump, it was something that we had thought through very intentionally and we had planned for so that it wouldn't ruin us financially if it didn't work out.
Yeah. And that makes so much sense because you talk to people also who are talking about starting a business, and I don't think they realize how much time it takes and how much money it actually takes to build that from the beginning. They think they're just going to go out and people are just going to start buying whatever it is they're selling, right? Even if it's coaching, if it's advising, if it's a product, if it's whatever. I don't think they realize how hard it really is to build your brand, to get people to know you, to trust you to the point where they finally buy something from you. And money decisions aren't about dollars. Like you talked about how your decision wasn't about the dollars, it was about creating the life that you wanted. So when we're talking about offering a service or a product to somebody, it's also about what kind of life they're trying to build. So thinking about how that fits in is unique to building a business too. How are you going to solve that for other people? Now, I want to go back and talk about something that you mentioned in our chat before we recorded, and it was about an experience that you had when you were 18 in Guatemala. I would love for my listeners to hear that story.
I would love to share it. So I was a missionary for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. A month after I graduated high school, I shipped off to Guatemala. I was there for 2 years and it was a rough transition. I didn't speak Spanish and I got paired with a native Guatemalan. We live in what we call companionships. Basically, he was my roommate while I was there. So it's just me and this one other guy that doesn't speak English. I don't speak Spanish. We have to figure things out together. Thankfully, eventually I picked up on the language, so it got better over time. One thing I noticed in Guatemala that's totally different than the US is that there's not much of a middle class. In the US, we see these beautiful, suburban neighborhoods. I live in one myself. And there's this sense that you can progress. You can move from, being born in a poor household and end up wealthy by the end of your life. It's just not as much that way in other countries, Guatemala being one of them, where you can have a really poor lower class that's living in slums with dirt floors, cooking food over the fire. And you walk a quarter mile in the other direction, you have these beautiful high rise apartments with these people that have American style jobs. It really opened my eyes to the opportunity that we have in the United States where I just hadn't realized that blessing before, that we have the opportunity to grow. We have the opportunity to progress, to take chances, to try things that are new, and really capitalize on that. As part of my responsibilities while I was a missionary in Guatemala, I was mostly teaching about Jesus Christ and helping the local church down there. But I was also what we call the financial secretary. I was basically the treasurer for our organization. So we had about 200 missionaries. We had about 100 different properties where the missionaries were living. And don't know why they did it, but they gave a 19-year-old the responsibility for some of these financial decisions. It was cool. I mean, I was managing all of our cash reimbursements. People would mostly transact in cash in Guatemala. And so we'd have missionaries that would pay their bills and then they'd get reimbursed by the mission. And it's just a different experience. I was going to the bank every week and there's armed guards with huge guns right outside the bank. I was also responsible for coordinating transportation for missionaries and paying for those contracts that we had with transportation contractors. So it was like, just get your hands in, get dirty, get messy, negotiating rent contracts in Spanish with these landlords where we had rental contracts for missionaries. And it really excited me because I realized that finance is like this huge optimization problem. And the more efficient I can make it, the more that I could help our organization. I could help missionaries have a good experience and make it a smoother transition for them. I could save us money as a nonprofit too, that we could use for, more of our church materials instead of using them on our overhead costs. So it was a lot of fun, and it opened my eyes to the opportunities that you can create with money.
Yeah, it's a great story because being immersed in that culture helped you learn the language by being in it, but you also learned the language of money by being thrown into it. So you had some sink or swim moments there in entering a Spanish speaking community and the money responsibility. So I think that's such a great story. All right, let's get to the subject at hand, making six figures and still feeling behind. Why do you think so many people strive to get to that six-figure number? Like, six figures, once I make that, my money problems are going to be solved. Why is that still a benchmark? And why do people think that everything's going to change when they get there?
Definitely ingrained in our culture. And it's interesting because I'll share a little bit of my personal story on this too, because I think it illustrates a lot of answers to your question. My life has been maybe a little bit backwards for most people's journey. The first time I made six figures, I was actually a college student. I was doing door-to-door sales and I was quite good at it. So I actually made over six figures my junior going into senior year of college, which most people don't have that opportunity until after they graduate. I realized that I was working so much, I was more miserable than I was when I was broke the year before. And it was like just this very eye-opening experience for me as a 23-year-old that money's not going to make me happy. And what I realized is that having money can create the environment that fosters happiness, but money itself is not going to make me happy. So seeing a big number in my bank account didn't make me happy. And then I went on this journey of like, how can I use these financial resources to actually become happy and create a better life for myself, which I think everyone can resonate with. We've all, kind of been through that path. But where the trap lies is really the emphasis on consumerism in our culture, where people think that the answer is, I'm going to use this money to make myself happier by buying a boat or a car or a nicer house or whatever it might be. And if you want to foster an environment of happiness, you need stability. And so that looks like some of the more boring answers of an emergency fund, building passive income through investments, living below your means, not having a lot of consumer debt. Those things take time, but that's actually the soil, so to speak, where you can plant the happiness in your life. And I was lucky enough to figure that out pretty early on. So when my wife and I got married, we really prioritized, let's stay free from consumer debt and let's always try and live below our means, because that creates the options for us that ultimately leads to flexibility, that leads to stability, that leads to happiness.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so hard to do that though in today's world, because you feel like all these other people are doing all these other things and you see it and you have the fear of missing out and you feel like if they're doing it, I should be able to do it, when really they probably shouldn't be doing it either. It's really hard, especially with social media and all of that right now. So in the financial services world, we have a term Henry, which is high earner,
Yeah.
not rich yet. So usually these are younger people who are maybe out of college, maybe have a really good job, and they all of a sudden are making money, but they're not rich yet. So they have a strong income, but they don't have anything to show for it yet. And I think one of the things that I see sometimes is that they just are spending the money. They're like, oh, I'm going to get the house, I'm going to get the car, I'm going to get the things. And they don't realize how important the value of time is in saving money and getting started, investing, and all of that. What else do you see with these Henrys who you work with when they are not having much to show yet and they're starting to earn this money? What are the things that are obstacles for them or things that they're blind to?
Couple big obstacles. One is a lack of education, and then another one is your financial behaviors. A lack of education can come from maybe someone that wasn't really taught about money by their parents. And so as they become an adult, earning income and managing money wisely are two separate skills. And it is very common to have the skill of being able to earn income without the skill of being able to manage it well. So if you find yourself as a maybe as a Henry falling in that category where you're like, man, I'm so good at making money, but it just falls through my hands like water, focus on that education piece and get yourself up to speed of, how does this work? How can I manage my money wisely? You have to understand things like compound interest. Compound interest can work against you with credit cards, other loan payments. It can also work for you with investments. And you have to know how to strike that balance in your life. So the more that you educate yourself, the better decisions you're going to make naturally. The second piece of that is financial behaviors. And this one really comes back to delayed gratification. I've noticed in my life, this is a pattern beyond just finance, it applies to all other areas of life, where you can make a decision that leads to short-term satisfaction and long-term pain, or you can make a decision that creates short-term pain but leads to long-term satisfaction. If you want financial success, you have to make the decisions that lead to short-term pain but long-term satisfaction. And the more you do that, the more successful you're going to be. So it comes down to being honest with yourself, recognizing if you do have a spending problem, if you're living beyond your means. The more honest you can be with yourself, the more you can start to work on changing that behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a study out there that says that you thinking of yourself in the future is like a complete stranger to you. So your future self is more of a stranger to you than someone who lives across the street who you see all the time but never talk to. Your future self is a complete stranger because you don't know who that person is. And so one of the things that I do with my clients is have them start picturing or thinking about who that future person is so that they can give money to that future person and make their life easier, right? So they see that future version of themselves, because you're exactly right. It's so easy to just say like, well, I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I might not be here. I'm just going to spend the money now and I'm not going to worry about it. I have time. When someone says to you, I should be farther ahead by now, what do you usually want to know before you agree with that?
I would want to know, what benchmark are you measuring yourself by? And that will probably tell all the answers I need. I remember this one interaction I had with a client that said that exact thing. They're about 30 years old. They said, I feel like I'm so behind my peers. And I said, well, where do you expect to be? They're like, oh, I just feel like I'm like, put a number to it. Where do you expect to be? And I had to kind of push them. Finally, they gave me a number of income and net worth of what they thought was like on track. And I said, okay, let's verify that. And, we go look up the statistics together. It turns out where they thought they needed to be at 30 years old was actually the median net worth and income for like a 55-year-old person, at the peak of their earning potential in their career. And I think that really helps put things in perspective, that there is definitely a skew because we see that social media lens. There's one other piece I want to address here, which is there are people that are way ahead of you. And, I've been lucky enough to meet some of those people that are making $2 million a year. There are certainly people like that out there. And I think it's okay to just acknowledge that. Like, yeah, there are people that are light years ahead of me. That's okay. I'm running my own race.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I find is that people that feel like they're behind, I mean, sometimes they are truly behind, but sometimes they feel like they're behind because they've heard all of these things that they should be doing and they didn't do them, or they didn't know how to make them work for themselves. And so they feel like they're behind because they didn't do this and they didn't do that and they didn't do all these things, but they've done enough and they don't realize that they've done enough. So sometimes they're not really behind.
That's a good point. It's interesting because I was fortunate. My parents were good about teaching me about money. And you mentioned earlier the time value of money. The earlier you start, the more it's going to help you. Even small changes can make a big difference. When I was about 20 years old, my dad came up with this family competition. And this was my first exposure to investing. For Christmas that year, he gave each of us a stock that was worth $100 each. So we're each starting with $100. He helped each of us open our first brokerage account. And so it was me, my sister, and my three brothers as well. So there were five of us. And he made a family competition. He said, here's your $100 seed money. You can invest it however you want. And whoever has the most money at the end of the year wins. So I had ExxonMobil was my stock. I think I was basically like the exact same by the end of the year. I might have grown a little bit. My brother invested in Adobe and it like tripled in value that year. So he won the competition. And it was really fun. We were picking individual stocks, but there was that element of competition. And it really taught me there's different ways to make money than just trading my time for $7.25 an hour at Chick-fil-A, which I did.
Yeah.
It opened my eyes to new possibilities. After that experience, I started getting smart and asking more questions to my dad and my uncle, who was also really helpful. And based on their recommendations, I opened a Roth IRA and I set a challenge for myself to max out that account every year, which is only, when I started, it was $5,500 a year that you could contribute, which sounds like nothing. It felt like it was doing nothing for forever. And then all of a sudden, a couple good years of compounding. And now every year, the growth in the account is worth more than the contributions that I make. And it's just really exciting to see that.
Yeah, it is. And I like that you mentioned that it's slow in the beginning, because I think everybody feels that they're putting their money in and they're contributing and it's just slow, and they might even go down and they get frustrated because they feel like this is supposed to be earning more. It's supposed to be doing well. And I know it can go up and down, but I feel like it should have done more by now. But they don't realize that time is the main thing, time in the market. So I love that you pointed that out, because that is a huge thing to remember when we're talking about that.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where you kind of have to experience it to really internalize the lesson.
Yeah. Well, true. All right. So you work with small business owners on their personal financial strategy. So let's talk a little bit about that. So what are some of the unique financial challenges that small business owners face?
Depends on the income level. I think you could break this into a couple of categories here. The first one is small business owners that are self-employed. So I fall in that category, right? Of I don't have like a huge organization with employees. It's mostly just me and maybe some contractors that I pay for different things. And that's where most small business owners fall. Some of the mistakes I see in that group, or the most common, are not setting things up correctly from the beginning. And then you just get into the day to day life of your business. And suddenly it's 5 years later and you're still using the same system you created on day one. That can look like not separating out financial accounts, like still running personal expenses through business accounts. I see that all the time, or putting business expenses on personal cards. The more you can operate in silos of this is my personal and this is my business, the easier it's going to be from a tax perspective, the easier it's going to be from a financial planning perspective. It's just going to make your life a lot better. And this is really one of those areas where you don't know what you don't know. One thing that was a big eye opener to me is, when I first left my job, I didn't know that solo 401ks exist. And then I realized, hey, as a self-employed person, I can open up a 401k for myself. I can control all the contributions. So I think it's worth reaching out to mentors, learning those things that you don't know so you can learn how to use those strategies. That's the first group. And then the second group is going to be higher level entrepreneurs. Maybe you have more of an organization now. You have employees, you have a more complex business. You're making more than $1 million a year. Where things break down for that group is that 99% of financial advice is tailored more towards the common man, whether that's a retiree or an executive at a large company or a self-employed individual. There are completely different strategies for this group of entrepreneurs that are growing large businesses. It involves a lot more alternative assets, understanding how to structure your different entities, leveraging trusts and all sorts of stuff that goes into it where you can get really creative. And because you have so much creative license, it can feel overwhelming. And so it's really helpful to have someone in your corner of these are the things you need to be considering. This is how you can get creative to maximize your tax write-offs, to shelter your income, to protect yourself against legal liability, etc.
And I think by having everything separate gives you clarity too on what's business and what's personal. And I think when you start to keep it all together, you lose that clarity. You don't know where you stand. Is my business making money or not? Am I spending money? Am I earning money? Am I not earning money? It just gets cloudy, right? And so it's about creating a system where the business is there and it's separate, but it's supporting the person's life. What advice do you have for people who are maybe getting started or not making a whole lot of money yet and they have variable income? How do you help them stay in line with living within their means?
From a business owner or a self-employed perspective?
Like a business owner, self-employed person with variable income coming in maybe in the first few years when they're getting started and they're trying to live within their means, but they don't know when the money's coming in and how much.
Yeah. I'd say there's kind of a survival phase where if your income is less than your expenses, as soon as you get paid, you're going to have to spend it all on just your regular life expenses. I mitigated that by having a large savings account set aside where I was basically paying myself from my savings account as I was starting my business. If you have that option available, that would probably be my best recommendation there. If you don't have that option available, then know the risks that you're taking by starting a business. Once you get to the point where maybe on paper your income exceeds your expenses, but it's just still really bumpy where, it's up and down, you have big payouts and then longer periods where you don't make as much. What I would recommend is setting a salary for yourself earlier rather than later. So if you find out, okay, our family expenses are $7,000 a month or whatever it is, just pay yourself a salary of $7,000 a month. So you have your business checking account, your money that you're getting paid from your business comes into your business checking account, and you just set up a transfer 7K a month back to your family, your personal account. Eventually, that money is going to pool up in that business checking account. Maybe you have a month where you make 20K and you only pay yourself 7. And so this balance is growing. If that balance grows big enough to the point where you have more to survive those leaner months, then you can pay yourself a quarterly distribution on top of your normal paycheck. But it's kind of funny because I think most of us go into business, we want to escape that W-2 type of style. It's really what works best if you can set a salary for yourself early on.
I think in any way, shape, or form with money, it's always about structure and planning. And this is another example of that. Having structure and planning to your financials really does make a difference. What are the mindsets, the internal blocks, the things that people just can't see? What types of things do you see with either high earners that maybe they feel like they're making a lot of money, but they're still struggling?
Yeah, there's a few. One of the big ones I see is if you're making good money and you're still struggling, you're probably living where your expenses are right at your income. And it sounds very cliche, but it's true. Yesterday, I was talking to someone that makes $500,000 a year and they feel like they have nothing left over. And it's that lifestyle inflation. Another thing I see in business owners where maybe you're making good money, but you still feel like you're struggling is you don't have the right systems or structure in place, like we were talking about. The more you can systematize your finances, the better it's going to make your life and the more clarity you have to make those financial decisions. And also, I see people that just outgrow their beliefs or their mindset. I'll give you an example from someone that I've worked with where when they were growing up, their family had a lot of financial instability. And at one point, they were evicted from their house. His parents couldn't make the mortgage payment, they lost their house. That created a lot of financial trauma, obviously, in his life. And now, as an adult, he's very successful financially, but he doesn't feel that way. And it's because he has these underlying beliefs from when he was a kid of this financial instability. So you will find a point in your life where you outgrow your old financial beliefs, and it can be helpful to have someone, whether that's a peer or a mentor, point that out to you and help you recognize that so you can start to shed those beliefs and adopt a new mindset towards your finances.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the keynote talks that I do is called The Human Variable, Financial Wellness Reimagined. And the human variable is your money history and your money personality. And that example you gave is money history. And it's a story that sometimes you keep carrying with you, even when it's no longer true.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So if there were habits either from high earners or from business owners that you see a lot that you help people work through, what would those be?
A big one I see is not considering business expenses to be real expenses. I think there's a tendency where it's easier to spend business money than it is to spend personal money for some reason, even though it
Absolutely.
still impacts you the same way. One of the big fallacies I see is business owners that make financial decisions because it's a tax write-off. And even if you're in the highest marginal tax bracket, 37% at the federal level, well, congratulations. If you spend $100 and you save $37 in taxes, you still spent $63. You need to recognize that. And the more you spend in your business, the lower your profit's going to be, which is essentially lowering your income. That's a big one. It's easy to, in our personal lives, go to the grocery store and, if apples were $5 a pound tomorrow, be upset about that, but then not think about a $2,000 business expense that doesn't have any true ROI.
Yeah. Good point. In that same talk, I talk about money personalities. And I tell people you can have a different money personality for your personal life than you do in your business. Sometimes people have, they're more security seeking or savers in their personal life, but then in their work life, if they're entrepreneurs, they're like, go big or go home. I want to do all the things. You got to spend money to make money. And they have this whole other personality. That's exactly what you're talking about right now. And it does absolutely show up like that. Everybody's so uniquely different. It could be the opposite too. You never know. All right. Tell us who needs to find you and how they can find you.
Yeah. So if you want to level up your financial education, if you're interested in self employment, maybe you're a current business owner, or you want to know more about that world, you definitely benefit by coming into my ecosystem, so to speak. And the best way to do that is to find me through my podcast, Money with Jackson. It's on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. So pick an episode and start there. And if you like it, keep listening.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being my guest today. It's been wonderful having this conversation. I'll put all of your links in the show notes so people can find you. And here's my closing nugget for listeners. Thanks for listening all the way through. If you're making good money but still feel behind, that does not automatically mean you are failing. It may mean your money needs more direction, your systems need to catch up to your income, or your expectations need to be grounded in the real life you can actually live. Income matters, but income by itself doesn't create clarity. The real work is learning how to turn what you earn into choices, stability, and a financial life that feels aligned with where you are trying to go. Thanks so much for listening to Real Money, Real Life. Want to see what's blocking you from financial confidence or discover your money personality? Head to the resources page at lindagriz.com for our free quizzes. That's LINDAGRIZ.com/resources. If you're loving what you're learning, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. It helps more people find these conversations. This show is hosted and produced by Linda Grizely Ventures, LLC. Linda Grizely, that's me, is an investment advisor representative of Nectarine, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Linda Grizely Ventures, LLC is separate and unaffiliated with Nectarine. The views expressed on this show are those of the individuals expressing them and do not necessarily reflect the views of Linda Grizely, Linda Grizely Ventures, LLC, or Nectarine. Guests on the podcast may express opinions or discuss financial strategies that are their own and should not be considered recommendations or personalized financial advice. This podcast is provided for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only and should not be construed as personalized investment advice or a solicitation to buy or sell any securities or other products. Listeners should consult their own financial, legal, or tax professionals regarding their specific situation. Please visit hellonectarine.com and lindagriz.com for all relevant disclosures.